Okay. How has Amber typically been involved in promotions for her films?
As we talked about earlier, actively involved in the press and the promotion, whether that was on the press junkets, what we call when they tour the world and the actors tour together and answer questions from the press at various screenings and film festivals. And then also she was, on the cover of magazines, usually after her movies, especially after Justice League.
And how was the promotion of Aquaman 2 affected by the Depp Waldman statements?
Amber has not been involved in any of the promotion that's been done to date, or very little, particularly in a teasers that I've seen, we call, short little films about the making of and so forth. She's not featured in them. And also, very specifically, there was a big event that Warner Brothers put on during the fandom. I think it's a DC fandom event, which is a big kind of like Comic-Con style event. And they invited all of the actors, or the majority of the actors that have strong roles in film, to participate both in the posters and the artwork, and also participate at DC fandom. And Ms. Heard was not invited to either be in the poster or be at the event. And in fact, they told her she cannot come.
Now, can this hurt Amber's career, not being allowed to be in any of the promotional materials?
Absolutely. It means that nobody knows about her. She doesn't have the same part in the film. It's not going to take her on to her next movie. She's not being associated with the tremendous amount of promotion that's going to be made for this, movie that everybody's looking forward to see. So she's not a part of it because of this negative campaign.
How have the Depp Waldman statements affected any other films or TV project promotions for Amber?
So prior to the defamatory statements, but either around the, after or around the time that Aquaman 1 came out, she was in the TV show called The Stand. It was based on a Stephen King novel. So big book, going to be a big TV show. And again, Ms. Heard didn't do any press or promotion for that for the same reasons.
And what, if any, plans were there to have Amber Heard on the cover of LA Style relating to Stand before the Depp Waldman statements?
Right. So Ms. Heard was in, and they had done an article about her participation in this TV show, The Stand, the Stephen King novel related TV show, and they were going to give her the cover picture and cover story, and they took that away. I don't know if the article existed, but they certainly took away the cover picture and the cover story.
Okay. How have the Depp Waldman statements affected press requests for Amber?
There aren't any. So yes, they affected it because there used to be a lot of press requests, and now there aren't any.
Has Amber Heard obtained any roles since the Depp Waldman statement?
Again, for many years, no, for a good period of time, or a year and a half, 2 years, until she got this small movie called Into the Fire.
Okay. Has Amber obtained any studio movie roles since the Depp Waldman statements?
No.
How, if at all, have Amber's philanthropic opportunities been affected by Depp Waldman statements?
Again, she had some passion projects. She was invited to do some charity work, and she also had her own passion projects that she, loved and wanted to be involved with and even travel for. But they decided it wasn't going to be a good idea because every time she appears anywhere, the social media negativity campaign starts up again. So she hasn't been able to do any of her charity work.
What is an endorsement?
So an endorsement is when an actor associates themselves with a product, either for print promotion or commercials, like Jennifer Aniston doing the water, or Matthew McConaughey doing the car commercial. That's a product endorsement. He's paid to say that the product is good and be associated with the product.
How important are those endorsements to the actors in the entertainment industry?
Well, very, very important on two levels. One, they bring a good amount of income to them when they're not shooting a movie, so it's a good way to make money in between film roles. And then also, it shows the studios and the production executives and the financiers that the actor is relevant in the community because they're being associated with a product. So if it's a well-known product, that's really great. If it's a medium product, that's great, and so forth and so on. So you want to be, if you can, and if that's something that you like to do, not everybody does, but if they like to do that, then they can get a lot of value out of those product endorsements because then the studios see that there's a connection with the consumer, not just on the film, but also with product.
Did Amber have any endorsement activities prior to the publication of the Depp Waldman statements?
Yes.
Please explain.
So Amber was hired by L'Oreal to be a product and endorse their product, the makeup line. And she had a $1.5 million contract for 2 years. And they were able to work. They had 20 days of her work. They had the right to work with her for 20 days. And she started the work, and then when the defamatory statements came out, they essentially put a pause on working with her. So they no longer brought her to photo shoots, they no longer had her do public events for the product, and basically said, we love you, but we can't work with you right now because it's just too much.
Objection, hearsay.
All right. I'll sustain the objection. Next
Okay.
question.
Have the Depp Waldman statements affected that deal in any way with L'Oreal?
Well, they put it on pause and haven't done any of the work, so she's not out there in the public eye related to the product. And they have decided to continue working with her at some point once, as I said, this all quiets down, this trial is over, and hopefully the negative campaigns will stop. So they extended her contract, but they did not pay her for that extension.
And has Amber been hired for any other endorsement deals since the Depp Waldman statements?
No.
Now, did you assess Amber's losses as a result of the Depp Waldman statements?
Yes.
What did you do to assess those?
Well, first of all, I looked at Amber's career directly, so I wanted to see, as I said earlier, she worked consistently, and then she was on this kind of very large upswing with the big movies, Justice League and Aquaman and all of that, and The Stand with the Stephen King project. And then it stopped, right? So her work stopped. And then I looked at other actors that kind of grew up at the same time frame. Grew up meaning they started their career and had the same time frame to start going from the smaller projects to the well-known director projects to the big movie projects. And I looked at those actors, and I then saw, after they had their Stars Born moment, if you will, I wanted to see where their careers went. So I looked at several actors to see, including Jason Momoa, her co-star, to see what happened in their careers after such a successful film as Aquaman came out.
And why did you use that method of analysis?
It's a very common methodology in the entertainment industry to work with what we call comps. I think Ms. Kovacevic even used that word, comp. So with films, you try to find comparable films. With actors, you look to see comparable actors. So you can it's not a distinct actual, this is going to happen, but this is the probability with a reasonable certainty that with the right management team that she had and her acting ability and her looks and the press that she was getting and should have continued to get, that her career would have been similar to these other actors.
Have you used that method in other cases in which you've been an expert on damages?
Yes, I have.
Who did you select as comparable actors for your comparison?
Well, I wanted to look at actors that were in superhero films that had done really well at the box office. So I looked at Jason Momoa, her co-star. I looked at Gal Gadot, who is in Wonder Woman. I looked at Ana de Armas, who was in
Blade Runner?
Thank you, Blade Runner. I looked at Zendaya, who was in Spider-Man, and I looked at Chris Pine, who was in Star Trek and also Wonder Woman. About the similar age range, all attractive actors, all with good acting skills, all able to do stunts. So there are not that many actors to look at who do superhero characters. So it was a small pool to work from, but I took a wide range from those actors, both men and women, to see what could potentially happen to Ms. Heard's career.
Do you consider all of them to be identical for purposes of measurement?
Well, absolutely not. I mean, no two actors are identical. You can only look at that within a range of characteristics and work history, management team, and so forth.
And we've heard from Mr. Banya. Did you review Mr. Banya's Q-score analysis regarding the comparables you used?
Yes, I did.
And what, if any, opinions have you formed in reviewing Mr. Banya's analysis regarding the comparables you selected?
So Mr. Banya looked at calendar years to assess what happened in December of 2017 or 18 or 19, what happened in June, what happened in a very specific time frame, which works on some statistical analysis. But when you're talking about actors and their relationships to Q scores are related to the actor's viability and the consumer's mind, if you will, how well known or how much they're coming up in conversation. And so Mr. Bandy did not look at time periods of the actors that I compared them with to the film when it came out, so like right after the success of their big film, what was their Q score, but moreover, he just looked at them in a year range. So it doesn't coincide from actor to actor just because you look at it over time. You have to look at it specifically after each of those individuals' box office success with a particular film. You look at the Q score, high or low during that, and then you look at how low it drops, say, a couple months afterwards, and then if it comes back up, if they have another film or another event that brings them into the limelight again. So it's not about time, it's related to a specific activity or event, and he did not do that.
Okay. What did your comparisons show in terms of films that those actors had been in since their breakout roles? I'm talking about the comparables.
In terms of their, I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
Well, what happened with these other actors after they had their stars
Unrelated
born
to Q scores.
Right.
Oh, okay, sorry. So all those actors' careers, the ones I mentioned, they all either were a steady rise or even a meteoric rise in terms of where their career went after their Stars Born moment. Then they got some other good films, and maybe they got another film that performed extremely well. So it was a range, but they all were on an upward trajectory without a doubt.
And what does this mean for Amber?
With a reason, I mean, the way that the kind of industry works is usually, unless there is a force majeure or some really negative event, her career should have followed that same upward swing in about the same time frame, give or take 6 months to a year. But it would be very reasonable to believe that her career would have been on an upward trajectory within the range of those other actors.
What, if any, comparisons did you make respecting endorsement deals of these actors with Amber?
You know, again, all those actors that we've talked about all did multiple endorsement deals after their big movies or after their big series of movies. You know, Jason Momoa is on, Rocket Mortgage and Harley Davidson, as well as, 5 or 6 other companies. Zendaya is Lancome and fashion and water and jewelry, and Gal Gadot and Chris Pine and Ana de Armas. They've all done either a couple or many, and all of them have associated with a large brand. Unlike Amber, who hasn't even been able to work on the one contract that she had. She certainly didn't get any others.
So what did your analysis show with respect to Amber Heard's losses, but for the Depp Waldman statements?
They were significant, if we follow the trajectory of her, colleagues.
Well, let's start with at Aquaman 2. What would she have realized there?
Well, as I stated earlier, so from Aquaman 1 to 2, it went from $1 million to $2 million, right? So that was a pre-written contract. It doubled. So the agents were very excited after the success of Aquaman to go and negotiate a much higher fee like they did for Jason Momoa. They weren't able to do that. So in that instance alone, it was more than likely a $2 million loss just from that movie alone.
So 2 to 4, you'd said before?
It could have been 4, it could have been 6.
Objection leading.
Sustain.
Okay. What about other films?
So once, as Amber's agent, Ms. Kovacevic, I was doing okay. Ms. Kovacevic said that once you get that quote of the $2 million from Aquaman 2, that kind of was like the baseline for any other movie she would have done. So any other studio movie would have started from there, and depending on the success of Aquaman and how much press she did, maybe she worked on another great director, independent film, whatever, that $2 million for a studio film, and had it jumped to $4 million with the renegotiation, that then would have been the basis. So any future studio film that she would have done, any big budget film, would have been the basis at $4 million, and then most likely have gone up from there if she was able to get others, which she should have, just like the other actors.
Let's talk about TV for a minute. What would those losses have included?
Well, on The Stand, which was, about the same time as Aquaman, but got the press and the promotion got cut off because of the defamatory statements and the negative campaign, she got paid $200,000 an episode on The Stand. So on a TV series of 9 episodes, it's $1.8 million. So if she had, again, done other TV shows, it's very likely that whether she worked with a streamer or with one of the networks, that fee would have gone up from there. Her agents would have been able to use the leverage of the success of Aquaman 2 to put her, if she had done another television show, given rise to even a higher episodic fee. Some actors go up to $1 million an episode. Jason Momoa in his TV show got $1 million. So there's an exponential range of where she could have gone.
All right. What about endorsements?
Same thing, all the other actors were doing over the course of a couple years period, anywhere from 5, 6, 7 other endorsement deals, and Ms. Heard realistically should have gotten endorsement deals in other categories. L'Oreal is makeup, so probably not in makeup, but maybe water or clothing or jewelry or wellness, or it could have been anything else. And so she too should have, with a reasonable degree of certainty, gotten other contract deals based on the success of the films that she's been associated with and the TV shows she's been associated with.
And what would that have translated into in terms of dollars?
So in terms of dollars, okay, so if it was $1.5 million for L'Oreal for a 2-year contract, and let's give her 4 other $1.5 or $2 million deals, which all those other actors, especially the ladies, have gotten, then you're looking at an additional $8 million of income over time. I'm not saying this is in one period. We're looking at as far back as the defamatory statements of 2020 to now, which is almost 2 years. And again, as I said earlier, even when this is quiet, it will take 3 to 5 years for her to rehabilitate her career if she can. So we have to look at it as a period of a minimum of 5 years. So when I say $8 million for endorsement contracts, it would have been over time.
Okay. What, if any, losses relating to production or film activities?
Well, again, these other actors that we looked at, and there's a wide range of them. Some of them did bigger films and some of them did gigantic films, but it is very reasonable to assume that once you are in an Aquaman-style film, you'll either continue to do those, right? Some of these franchises, as we know, go 4, 5, 6 films, or she would probably have been in another studio film that had nothing to do with Aquaman. But again, so over the course of 5 years, it's very reasonable to consider that she would have been in at least 1 film a year at a minimum of $4 million, because that's what her precedent would have been had she renegotiated. And it's important to note that in her Justice League contract, if there is a Aquaman 3, her price is set at $4 million. So it's very reasonable to assume and to believe that if she did a film a year for 5 years at a minimum of $4 million a year without any negotiation, which probably would have happened, but let's just say that baseline, that would be another $20 million over that time frame.
What, if any, opinions do you have about Amber Heard's earning power over time?
That it would continue to rise. It's customary in the industry, as I've talked about earlier, that the negotiations, especially with her agents at William Morris, her fees would have gone higher. So I'm just using the baseline without any ability to foresee in the future that I already know she got negotiated for $4 million from Aquaman 3. So if we use that as a baseline minimum, but it very well would have gone up had her agents done the work that they wanted to do.
So combining all of these opinions and calculations that you've had, what, if any, range are the losses you are estimating for Amber Heard but for the Depp Waldman statements?
Right, so again, it's really important that I looked at, and hopefully you understand this, that it's over time, right? So let's just say a minimum of 5 years that we're going to talk about these losses, and it could be more, but at minimum, if you look at the film, the television, and the endorsement contracts, it's very likely that Ms. Heard should have earned between $45 and $50 million over that time period.
Are all your opinions to within a reasonable degree of probability or certainty?
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right, let's go ahead and take our afternoon recess.